Hey guys, welcome back to the What's Next podcast. Come to you from beautiful Monterey Beach, brought to you by Live Well Therapeutic Massage. Today we've got an amazing guest in here, Mr. Wade Odum. He's been working with me on the podcast here since the beginning, or he saw the struggles I was going through and trying to figure out how to get this thing going here. And when I met Wade, he was on disability for a number of different things, and we'll talk about it today. But it turns out, as we talked more, he's a sound coordinator, and he's worked for the churches. He worked in rock bands, and I asked him, how can you help me out with this? And of course, he graciously said sure, and stepped in to help me out. And what a difference he's made in this podcast. How you doing, Mr. Wade?
Doing fine, thank you, sir.
Good to see you today.
You too.
You're usually on the backside. You don't get to see you very often.
I'm usually just over there.
Yeah, right. Doing a great job for us.
Thank you.
So tell me, you're a couple years older than I am. You were born in 1963. I was born in 1966. Of course, 3 years doesn't seem like a lot, but as we became friends, it's there's a lot of differences. You got to see all kinds of like Van Halen shows. You got to see concerts that I was just a little too young for, and you being in rock and roll and music. And it's like, oh man, we have so much to talk about, because always Van Halen was always my favorite, through the 80s. And of course you had, I don't know if you're your favorite, but right up there.
Well, yours was Van Halen with David Lee Roth. Was your main thing. And I saw him with David Lee Roth a couple of times, and then when Sammy Hagar joined was when I kicked into a little bit different gear musically with the band. Prior to that, it was part of high school, and everybody loved Van Halen.
Right.
Everybody wanted Van Halen too.
Exactly.
And all of that kind of stuff. So, I felt like they took it up a notch musically when Sammy came in, and it became more melodic. It became more, I guess, mainstream.
Yeah. I remember people saying that. I had a cousin just loved Van Hagar, and I was like, oh, it's not the original, No,
and it was, and you're right, and it was not. It was not. It was a different thing.
It was a lot of fun. You came up in high school, and I asked you a little bit to break down a little bit of this. I know your dad was taught broadcasting most of your life, and he ran a radio studio, I believe, or
the college radio station at College of San Mateo. My dad was a instructor of announcing and of broadcasting, and different variations therein, subgenres of that. So. In that time frame, he was the manager of KCSM FM, which was the college broadcast station.
San Mateo, I think he said that.
San Mateo.
Yeah, okay.
So he had his hand in all things on the communication side of stuff, and I was brought up into that.
Right.
So I was a studio brat. I liked being in the studio. I liked smelling the styrofoam, and it's all dark and quiet, and people giving cues and taking cues, and it was just fascinating to me. So that was kind of where the ball started rolling internally for me. In a more significant way. Prior to that, I think in junior high, I started doing sound control for our church.
Oh, did you really?
And it was just like a little 2-channel amplifier.
Really?
And you turn one dial up when one pastor was talking, and you turn that down when he's done. You turn that one up when that one's talking. You turn that one down. So it wasn't really complicated compared to what it became in my career. But at the time, it was a responsibility, and it felt pretty good to have that and work with that.
That was the type of technology that we had back then.
It's exactly right.
It's exactly probably the basic technology.
Well, we're used to seeing now, when you see somebody on a TV or cable broadcast, they've got a little lapel mic that's clicked on their tie or their collar, or something like that. The church at that time, so this would have been mid-'70s, had lavalier microphones as well,
Did they?
which is what those little ones are called. But these lavaliers were the size of your thumb, and they were lassoed with a string, and the pastor would put the string around their neck, hang the microphone in front of them.
Oh, I see, right.
And I mean, it was as basic and straightforward as you were going to get.
It wasn't.
There was no
it wasn't
wireless.
wired right
It was
in,
all
right.
it was all wired, and yeah, it was a very different experience than going forward 30 years
Right.
and
right.
looking at life just entirely differently, technologically.
Yeah.
But it was cool.
Sound like you're raised in a pretty religious family, then, huh?
Yeah. I would say that we were fundamentally a Christian family.
Yeah.
Fairly conservative as far as our approaches to what we believed and how we believed, and respect other people's beliefs and stuff like that. But I was so involved in that I didn't even know there were really other denominations so much. So I knew of the Catholic Church, and I knew of the Presbyterian Church.
I see.
And I'd heard of a Baptist church, but I didn't know what that was.
Right.
And turns out there's a whole bunch of different approaches to following your Christianity, and Presbyterian was just one of them.
Right.
And it was good for me to grow up with it. It was
Yeah.
absolutely a good foundation for
Sure.
me to start from.
Yeah. That's always confused me a little bit. I was raised non-denominational or Protestant. And, of course, I went to a lot of church with my friends with the Catholic Church. And my uncle and his family were Jehovah's Witness. So I've been to a couple of those. And it's like, what's the difference? It's like, well, at a young age, I didn't really understand. You're all kind of praising God, but you just have a different name for his son. It was a little confusing for me
Sure.
as a child. Aren't we all part of the same Christian thing here? Why do we have to split it all up into Protestant? And, it just seems like dividing people that all had the same belief. That's
Right.
what confused me as a child.
What I ended up with is that I'm a believer in Jesus Christ,
Right, right.
and I have a relationship with him, and
Right.
that's kind of that's the basis.
Sure.
God didn't create denominations, in my
Right.
estimation.
Exactly.
People did.
Right.
And people did because they couldn't get along on how they wanted their churches to run and what they wanted their churches to focus on, and how all of that church work was to be done. And then it started to branch off into how you're saved, and if you're saved, and if you're saved, you should be able to do this, this, and this, and speak this way. And there was so much that got confusing for me too.
Yeah.
That fortunately I had some really amazing Christian influences and mentors in my life
Yeah.
that basically helped me just kind of bring it back to the basics, bring it back to a relationship, look at it as a relationship, and then realize that that's what matters come the end of time.
Right.
When the heart stops,
Right.
it matters
Then you
at that
find out.
point. To me, it matters where is your relationship with God.
Right. Yeah.
So those that are involved in different religions and view Christ one way, or this way or that way, the bottom line is going to be at the end of the line.
Yeah.
So I strive to set my life in such a way that I believe what I believe, stick with it,
Right.
be as consistent as possible, and at the same time recognize and know that I'm broken in so many different ways, and I'm a sinner. I am not perfect. I am the last person to point a finger at somebody, even though the first thing that I tend to want to do is like, hey,
right.
whatever
That's
it is,
human, right?
whatever's frustrating me, or you're driving too slow. Who knows what? Those are human things, and I get caught up in being exactly that.
Yeah.
But that should not be a reflection on the God that I believe in, and wanting to live a better life than that.
Yeah. I know my mom as a young child, she tried to live the Christian life, but I remember saying, her saying that, well, look at the Catholics. As soon as you walk into their church, they have a statue of Mary, and God says not to pray to any other, and then there's this church, the Jehovah's Witness, and tell me why this is why it's different, and it's very confusing. It's very confusing.
Yeah, and it's important for each person to do their own research. Do your own research.
Right.
Look into it and figure it out.
I was reading a little bit about through your blogs, and you mentioned there around 1979, you learned about spiritual warfare firsthand. Break that down for me. What do you mean by that? Well,
in that time frame, end of junior high, beginning high school, a small bit of backstory. I used to love to build models. So I built model cars and planes, and then I would take the leftover parts of some of those models, and then I would build my own, creation out of that, create something.
I did the same thing too.
And it was so much fun. And I would put them up on a shelf in my room, and they were just there for, display for me. And there was a period of time where at church, they were starting to get more into talking about spiritual warfare.
I've never heard that term. I don't know what that means.
Well, it means that that there's a physical world and there's a spiritual. Mm-hmm. And this is all coming from, this is my perspective.
Sure, right.
So
that's why we're here. I want to hear your perspective.
So from my perspective, there's a spiritual realm, there's a physical realm. And in the spiritual realm, forces are fighting and have been fighting since the beginning, literally since the beginning of time. That's what I believe. And there are times when those spiritual battles can become evident or visible to the people that are in the physical realm, even if they're not like tuned in and focused on whatever it is that's happening. So one of the areas that was a challenge for me was like movies. Mm. So horror movies. There's a horror genre, and that didn't always bother me so much, but I never felt good about the horror genre that dealt with evil and evil personification.
Right.
And things like The Omen and there were just a handful in that time frame.
It sure was. Exorcist.
So you can have some right.
You know.
So going from that, I watched one night. My sister had a date, and they were watching. I think it was The Omen. I don't remember now which specifically it was.
But it scared the crap out of you.
Well, I got so scared that all I could think to do was laugh.
Oh, really?
So my way of handling my fear was to laugh at it and just kind of try and just get it out of my
Force it
system,
out.
right?
Yeah, right.
So, I want to say it was like 2:14 in the morning, following watching the movie.
Yeah.
2:14 in the morning, I woke up out of a dead sleep, sat up perfectly straight like an L,
Yeah.
and heard a voice that said, "You laughed at me tonight."
Hello.
And
Not directly, man.
I couldn't speak.
Really?
All I could do was listen.
Wow.
And it was, "You laughed at me tonight. You're not going to laugh at me again. This is not a joke.
No kidding.
I'm not something to be laughed at."
Right.
And I don't know how long that whole process went on. I was soaked in sweat.
Yeah.
I remember feeling the sweat pouring. I mean, it was an unnatural, just, wow, this is not okay.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And, in your head, you're thinking, I need to call for mom and dad. I need to call.
Right.
And yet I can't.
Well, you couldn't.
I couldn't.
Really?
And then the next thing that popped up in my head was something that had been taught a couple nights before at the youth group at church, which was to verbally say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, Satan, be gone."
Wow.
And so I was trying like
Right.
crazy to be able to mouth the words, to be able to utter it. And it just laughed at me.
Really?
And then there came a point where I was physically able to say it. And when I did, I felt like I was pushed or thrown back onto the bed, onto my pillow.
Right.
And I was out.
No kidding.
When I woke up the next morning, all of my toy models had
Yeah.
been crushed.
Oh, no
They
kidding.
were all broken
Wow.
and on the floor.
Jeez.
The clothes in my closet, all the hangers were still hung up, but all of my shirts and pants and everything were all on the ground in the closet. The closet
Wow.
door, by the way, was closed.
Yeah. It's like, I don't remember doing that.
And I didn't do that.
Right.
And my mom came in to get me up for school. And, I wasn't really in a great state of mind to be going to school at that point.
Yeah, right.
And I was still freaking out about the models on the floor, and I didn't know about the stuff in the closet. My mom opened the closet and found that, and she immediately was kind of going after me about, "What'd you break your models for?"
Right.
It's like, I didn't break my models. Here's, this is all that I remember. This is the conversation that I thought I was having, though I couldn't say anything.
I couldn't reply.
And she said, "You know what? I'm going to make an appointment with one of the pastors at the church."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, that's fine. Let's do that.
Let's
do that right
today."
now.
Right.
That's a great idea."
Maybe they
And
can sort some of this out that your young mind was just.
So it was. It's like, tell us what's going on.
Yeah.
Why did this
Right.
happen all of a sudden?
Thousands of people watch this movie. Why was I
Right.
so
Right.
open to it?
And so the pastor that we spoke to had said that oftentimes when somebody, especially in their youth, but not only in their youth, but especially in their youth, if they're going to be going into ministry and become involved in Jesus Christ ministry, there will be a frontal attack. There will be a spiritual attack
No
that
kidding.
will cross over
Wow.
to scare you, to deter you, to say, if you continue down the road you think you're going to go down,
Yeah.
then I'm going to be right there.
Right.
I'm not going to leave you alone.
Yeah.
And you start going, maybe I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe
This
I need to
evil-
do something else
Right.
than get harassed by things that I can't see and I can't touch, that can clearly touch things
Right.
And, you know, that,
There's nothing I can do about it.
and there's no, and
out of my
there's
power.
nothing physical that I can do about it.
Right.
But there is something spiritual I can do about it. And spiritually, you can take authority over those spirits. If you believe,
Yeah.
you can take authority over those spirits and tell them to back off in Jesus' name.
Yeah.
And that they have no business being a part of you or holding on to you or interfering in your life and that. And that becomes part of the spiritual warfare that will grow probably through the rest of your life as it did in mine. But that's when it started.
Right.
So I learned then in, junior high, end of junior high, that I was probably going into ministry in some way. I just didn't know what that was going to be.
Yeah.
I didn't, what does that mean? I'm going to be a pastor? I'm going to be
some kind of clergy.
Am I a custodian in a church?
Yeah.
I'm
right.
What?
That works too.
Right?
Right.
Because if you're working in a church, you're doing ministry.
Right. For sure.
So I wasn't sure what all that was going to entail, but it really struck and changed my life in that moment. And at that time,
Really?
my life changed.
Yeah.
Because I felt like, okay, I'm aware of something now that I've never been aware of.
Yeah. Right.
I'd heard about it. And if you read the Bible, you read about times where people were affected by demons, were affected by demonic forces and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And I believe those things to be true. So, for me, that was kind of like, okay, yeah, so that was real. But that was 2,000 years ago.
Right.
So, what's up? It's we're coming towards 1980. Why would this all of a sudden just show? So when he explained what he did,
Did you think were you thinking at that time that maybe you might want to go into the clergy?
I didn't think that I wanted to become a pastor. I didn't think that was what I was expecting. I think actually I wasn't expecting. I didn't really know what it meant, but I knew that music was really, really, really big inside of me.
Right, right.
And music was a conduit. And I felt like God used music to speak to me and to comfort me and to encourage me and to console me. And then I started realizing that other kinds of music can do similar things, but go in the other direction.
Right, right. Oh, right, for sure. Right.
And that was kind of that was an eye-opener as well.
Yeah.
And I had already begun to really enjoy a lot of those styles of music and those bands.
Yeah. The hardcore,
some just the really hard rock, but stuff that for me had a message that was not friendly to Christianity, was not friendly to God.
Right.
And the normal culprits, the Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden.
Right. Iron Maiden, that's one I was thinking, that always had such satanic kind of covers, and maybe not satanic, but definitely leaning to the evil side.
But it leans towards the evil side, right? And a lot of bands wanted to use that for marketing because kids are drawn to the occult.
Right.
And it's all kind of part of this whole fallen nature thing of human nature.
Right.
So
I remember when I was young, they said Kiss was knights in Satan's service. It was like, oh, that's so cool, It's like they're so badass, You don't realize that, break that down, will you?
Right. Well, and kind of in the same time frame, I had learned that Kiss also stood for Keep It Simple, Stupid.
Right.
Right. And if you were to look at their music, their music wasn't stupid, but their music was very straightforward and more on the simplistic side.
Yeah. More love songs than anything if you really listen to them, right? It was people's fascination with the occult that they started to put these different tags on these different bands, and that especially happened in the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
So I realized, kind of early 80s that I needed to be looking in a different direction musically.
Yeah.
And my sister, shout out to Mindy. Hi, Mindy. She had introduced me to a band called the Resurrection Band, which later became just known as the Res Band. But they had a song called Broken Promises. And she suggested that I listen to it. And we were at a camp, I think, in Fresno. And it was a Christian camp up in Fresno, youth camp. And I remember listening to it, and all of a sudden, tears just started.
Really?
And I was freaking out.
Just hit you, huh?
What the heck is going on?
Really?
And there was it wasn't so much of a purge, but it was a recognition that I was entertaining a lot more negative things in my musical life and in my spiritual life than I should be and should have been. And she was helping me she was putting effort into helping me see that there are Christian bands that play in similar styles. So it's not so much the style of music.
Right.
It has more to do with the message in the music.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets into kind of a gray area with musicians, and I'm a musician, play guitar and bass and stuff. So, at some point, people want to ask, well, if you're a Christian and you believe in Jesus Christ and you play a song that's an instrumental, is it a Christian song?
Yes.
It's like, well, it's an instrumental song.
Right.
And it can be whatever it is for the person that's listening to it.
That's kind of how it breaks down, huh?
Was it written with evil in mind? No. Would it be used for that? Not for me. Not in any way that I would do stuff. No. But at that point, I was thinking, you've got people who are Christians that play music, and then you also have folks that want to go out and market themselves as Christian musicians and Christian artists.
Yeah.
And I delved into both of those realms.
Did you?
Yeah. So I delved into both of those realms in the 80s and 90s. And it was interesting. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I definitely saw even more spiritual warfare stuff that went on when I was in a heavy metal band down in Garden Grove, Orange County area down by LA. And we decided that our band was called Forthright, and we were going to pursue the youth of that whole area with a message of Jesus Christ and that he saves and that they have an option. They don't have to just listen to only what is being provided through MTV, through Headbangers Ball, through
Yo MTV
raps. I want my MTV. So through all that stuff, we decided that was something that we were going to do, and we chose a style of music that was reasonably big at the time, which was the hard rock, heavy metal kind of glam side.
Yeah.
We didn't get into all of the glam stuff.
Sure.
There are no photos. But we didn't really get into that side of it, but we did enjoy the performance of doing it and being able to musically express ourselves on stage and engage with the kids.
But you're infusing some of the religious
So we were
idea
absolutely
of it?
infusing our Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
See, I always gear away, and I know you and I've talked about this before at other points, that I shy away from the whole religious thing because I feel like that has such a connotation now and a stigma to it. And for me, it's faith, and for me, it's a relationship.
Right.
So what we wanted to bring across was that, you can have a relationship with Jesus Christ. You can have a relationship with God.
Right.
And you can listen to music that encourages that and supports that. And we would use the music to deliver that message. There were times where we had told we played for churches. We also played at parks. We played at a variety of different places.
How fun.
But when we played at churches, sometimes we would just forewarn the youth leadership and say, hey, this isn't going to be your style of music. More than likely, it's not going to be something you're going to dig.
Yeah.
Because most of those folks are from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't going to be your thing.
Yeah. Hardcore bass
so
and electric
feel
guitars.
free not to be there.
Right.
And if you want to be there, just hang out in the back, but don't discourage what we're doing or try and dissuade what our efforts are in trying to reach kids for Jesus.
Right. You never know how you're going to reach them. So
Right.
Right.
You don't know. You don't know who's coming to a show.
Right.
You might be doing a show for 5 people. You might be doing a show for 150 people.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Right.
So that became, kind of a focus on our part.
Yeah.
And we took pride in that. Pride.
Sure.
We felt good about it.
Sure. Right.
But there were definite nights where we would have technical difficulties that were absolutely outrageous and were unrealistic.
Yeah.
And just we had one night where we were performing at a church, and all of our amplifiers, right as we went on to the stage and we went to play, all of the amplifiers had been unplugged from the walls.
Really?
But there'd been nobody in the room
Right,
but us.
Isn't that weird?
And we all kind of looked around and went,
Did you do that?
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Let's plug these back in.
Right.
And then we should probably pray and ask God to protect our equipment and protect the night and protect the kids.
Sure.
And let's get back to doing what we came here for and not be derailed by something that in and of itself is scary.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Because, again, now you're dealing with that faceless, not physically there, but obviously physically there in some way.
Right.
And at another point, one of the amplifiers, our bass player was playing, and he played, and there was kind of a funky sound, but he kept playing, and the amp kept working, and so that was all great.
Yeah.
The amplifier had gotten unplugged again, but he was able to still play, and there was still power going to the amplifier.
That's crazy.
It's not, at that point, it's not a physical, right?
Yeah, right.
At that point, you're looking at the physics going, if it ain't plugged into the socket, it's not going to work.
Right. But it was still working.
But it was still working.
Crazy.
And we were able to finish our set. And at the same time, we kind of rejoiced that we were worthy of being gone after.
Yeah.
We're worthy of being up on a radar.
Yeah.
And I think, overall through the rest of life, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy thing. And there's no easy part to it. Sometimes things will be mellow and chill and all that, and then other times, it's gonna be difficult, and you'll have some hard things to try and explain to children,
right,
or families and such.
Yeah.
So
I had a very confusing childhood. My mom was very into religion, and she died very early. And then I got kind of what I call a hot potato kid. Just kind of passed around to whoever could take me on for a while. And as you grow up like that, it's like, what kind of a God would let that happen? You know, why would that happen? So you grow up with questions, and
Right.
but there are weird things that happen. You know, it's like, where is that?
Right.
Just the other day, I was working on a gal, and she asked me what religion I was, and she said, "You're what's it called when you don't believe? Not agnostic, but
Sure. Draws a total blank.
I know I'm drawing a blank, but and I kind of jokingly said
Atheist.
atheist. Yeah, that's what she said, and I said, I can sit here and try to explain to my dog what I'm doing on the computer, but he will never understand. He knows I'm doing something on the computer, but he'll never understand what I'm doing. And that's exactly how I feel about religion. I have no idea what the main purpose is. I can see there's something going on, and I don't feel comfortable going any further than that, because there's so many different beliefs, and there's so many different things,
Right.
Who's right, who's wrong. We had a guy come in here and say, well, between Abraham and Jesus and all these different guys, they were all working for God. They're disciples of God. Why, and we're all serving the same God. Why can't we all just be together? And whatever disciple brought us to this God, why can't we just celebrate him, everybody? But it's
Right.
got to be so broken up, and there's so much evil and fighting and killing over religion. It's just like, how, it's hard for a human like me to make sense of it all, And I really do look at people that are so strong in their faith, like you, and say, where does he get the strength? Where does he get his just a steel, this is what I believe. It's like, it's interesting, to me, to look at religion like that. There are so many different options. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and there truly are.
Faith, I guess, is what everybody says.
There are a variety of faiths. There are a variety of, as far as the world is concerned, there are a variety of religions,
Right.
And philosophies.
Right. Buddhism doesn't really have a god. It's just more
Right.
trying to bring yourself closer to
Well,
enlightenment for the next
more
lifetime.
self-focused.
Right.
Focus in on yourself.
Exactly right.
And all of that. And I think each person has to find their walk. They have to
Right.
find their path.
Yeah.
And then at some point commit to, it's like, I'm going to know more.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to research this.
Right.
And, at that point you're committed.
Yeah.
You're going in to figure
Yeah.
something out. And my belief is that for the people that, decide that that's something that they want to do, and that's something they want to pursue, that's also an invitation for the enemy to throw as much confusion and as many choices as possible,
Right.
to overwhelm the searcher. There are so many paths. How are you going to choose which path?
Sure. Right.
Well, I was brought up in a church, so I was given a step up,
Yeah.
right? But it was my choice to believe.
Yeah. Could have gone another way, even
Absolutely.
being raised in that household.
And
Sure.
I was already delving into, music that wasn't healthy, which
Yeah.
had unhealthy messages and
Sure.
all of that. And I knew that wasn't, ultimately, that wasn't good for me internally.
Yeah.
There was a period of time in there where things got really, really dark. And, I know a number of people have their time frames where they think about just leaving
Yeah.
and killing themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So I had a period of time in that same period of the, late junior high and
Yeah.
into early high school, late
Sure.
junior high, where I was really struggling.
You couldn't find your way, huh?
And so and again, music playing a major role, depending on what music I was listening to,
Yeah.
was contributing to the thought patterns
Sure.
and processes.
Sure.
And it was repetitive because I'd listen to it over and over
Yeah,
and over
right.
and over.
Exactly.
So I did notice a significant change when I stopped listening regularly to music that had more of a negative message. I could say evil, but I want to stay clear of pointing a finger at somebody and saying they're evil, or what you wrote. You wrote for this reason. It's not my place.
Right.
I don't feel like I'm supposed to be.
Excuse me.
I don't feel like I'm supposed to be judging somebody else.
Right. Right.
In that sense.
Right.
I think from a Christian standpoint, we're supposed to judge each other as far as how we're living and how we're behaving, and I think that's fair. But that's between Christians.
Right. Right.
So again, now you spread that out to denominations. Now we're all Christians,
Right.
but different denominations who think that way's wrong and that way's right and that way's the only way to do it and that way is a path to hell. And this, it again, confusion and all this stuff starts to just, fill up.
Right.
And people that are trying to find their way end up going, I don't want any part of that.
What if I dig into this and I get deep into it and it was the wrong way? Like, how do I know? Right.
Right. Well,
Especially in a world that, like today, there's so much evil going on.
It
And
sure
there's
is.
so much godlessness.
sure is.
It's hard to break it all down. What's the right path? Like, why is all this evil going on? And it just well, anyways, enough about religion. Switch gears a little bit.
That's all good.
So-
Well, you had asked about the D&D, and that actually was kind of one of the ways that we broke in that direction. And the D&D got a rap for being an evil game.
Did it? Okay.
It did.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that people used that game in ways that were not okay.
Really?
I think.
Yeah.
I think
I don't
so.
know enough about it. I just thought
Yeah.
it was Dungeons and Dragons and fighting each
It's
other.
just a
and
role-playing game.
grouping up and
Right. It's a
it like-
role-playing game, and you have ghosts, and you have kings
really?
and queens,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
have dragons and dungeons and monsters and all this kind of stuff. Our group, as we played, stayed away from deities, stayed away from demons,
I see.
stayed away from angels.
Right.
We wanted this mental playground to be one of just a created
Medieval.
medieval monster,
Sure.
good versus
Chasing
evil.
dragons.
And it's
Sure.
good versus evil.
Truly. Yeah.
So that was significant. That for me, good versus evil was significant.
Yeah.
And it was something I latched onto. And so did my friends that we all became very, very close and very, very close brothers and buds. So
that was more than, that was before the time where you could like hook up like Windows and play on, because nowadays you can get on the computer and play with somebody in China. Or,
right.
Was it that advanced at that point? I don't think it was.
No, you had to use a book. You had to use dice.
Oh, geez.
And you had little miniatures that you could buy and paint
Oh, okay.
if you wanted to.
Was it even on the computer?
It was not on the computer.
Oh, it was actually like a board game.
When I graduated
Oh,
in
I
'82,
see. Yeah.
there were only like 2 kids in my high school class that had computers.
Yeah.
And that was because their parents worked in the industry.
Sure, right.
So all the rest, nobody else.
Wow. So you actually got together in one room to play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
How about that?
Everybody would bring 2 liters of Coke or Mountain Dew or Pepsi or, whatever, and big old bags of chips.
Sure,
and we'd sit down around a table and we would play for 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 hours. We had a couple of times where we played for like 48 hours.
No kidding.
And it was ridiculously stupid, but it was fun.
Right.
We had a blast. And it was a strong time of building socially with us as friends.
Right.
And brothers and sisters, because we had some gals that played with us as well.
Really?
So this would have been like 80, 81 into 82.
Sure.
And we still played into 83 and 84, I think, even 85. But less, once I got into college and was going through the college side, college wasn't so much my focus, but music.
Oh, I see, right.
So I veered away from, the role playing and all of that and went more towards wanting to do bands. And that was where my time was learning how to play music and write music. And
did you go to school for broadcasting or something else?
I did. When I came out of high school, I went to College of San Mateo.
Okay, yeah.
And because I was interested in broadcasting, I had the pleasure of having my dad as my instructor for a few different classes. Love you, Dad, and I do. But those were not easy classes.
No.
And he was absolutely making sure that nobody would think that I was getting an easy route.
Right.
Because I didn't.
I worked in my dad's lumber company. I had to work twice as hard to catch twice as much shit.
Right.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
So coming through all of that, I took broadcasting, and if I had stayed with it and held it as my major, that's what I would have graduated with. But I became kind of disillusioned with the whole junior college thing.
Did you?
And so what would have been a 2-year junior college became a 4.5-year junior college thing. And then it was, well, if you're not going to be going to college, then you need to be paying rent.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that, then became the jobs and, started that.
What kind of jobs you jump into? Was it broadcasting or anything you could do?
No. I took whatever I could find. Right. And, some of that was working at the local mall in a clothing shop. I worked at a place called Chess King, if anybody remembers Chess King.
I do, right?
So Chess King got killer clothes. Actually did some modeling for the college.
Nice.
Modeling some of the stuff from the Hillsdale Mall. And that was super cool. And that kind of opened some doors of meeting different people and stuff. And so I worked at a photography shop, developing films. For a period of time, I worked at a video
giving your age
rental
away.
place.
Worked at the 24-hour.
I'm old.
48-hour.
Yeah.
Camera shop.
It was. They were all good experiences. They weren't all fun.
Sure.
Right. But they were all good experiences, and
Socially.
I learned something
Yeah.
from each of the different things that I did. I was actually sharing with my wife, Cece, that there was a period of time where I worked for a Ford dealership that was in San Carlos, I believe. It was either San Carlos or Belmont, and they're not there now; they're long gone. But I took a job there as a cleanup guy. So I would clean the stalls of all the oil and the fluids on the ground.
Sure.
And, it didn't take me but about 3 months to go, nope.
That's not what I'm going to do.
Nope.
I don't even see anything where I want to work up to.
Nope, it's not working. I don't want to do this. And it didn't last very long.
Yeah, right.
But
Now, when I met you, you came in to get some massage, and I know you have some metal in your back. I know there was some things we had to, but your main thing was something called HKPP or something. Tell me what that
Right.
is. So you said it was kind of like a diabetes thing, but it was something different. Can you walk us through what that is? Because that's something I have never heard about. Maybe you can educate some people that are going through this and don't even know it.
So HKPP stands for Hypokalemic Periodic Paralysis.
Can you spell that? No, just kidding.
Nope. Not off the top of my head. So that is it's a condition. It's a neuromuscular disease.
Okay.
It can spontaneously happen out of nowhere. Body just starts.
Right.
That's not common. What's more common is familial. So it's inherited,
I see,
which
right.
was in
That
my
makes
case,
sense.
it was inherited.
Okay.
My parents don't have it, but my grandfather on my mom's side had it.
Skipped a generation.
So skipped generation. My mom was a carrier.
So they didn't even know anything about it.
They didn't know about
Right.
it. And at the time when my grandfather had it, he was being treated for hypoglycemia, which was also something I was treated for, hypoglycemia, because I started showing signs of hypoglycemia at an early age. And only after several years of researching and going back and really examining things did we realize what was going on with my grandpa.
Oh, okay, right. So
Was
he was
HKPP.
misdiagnosed for all those years and given the wrong medicine?
He wasn't given any medicine. He
Oh, I
was
see.
just given, sugar and protein and peanut butter and, combinations therein. He had a number of trips to the hospital when they would be visiting at our house in San Carlos.
Yeah.
And I was there for those times where the ambulance showed up and
Really?
picked him up and carted him off. And I just had never put together two and two.
Yeah, right.
And so when things started going really sideways for me in like 2005, and I started having bouts of paralysis. I started having bouts of muscle spasms and profuse sweating, just out of nowhere. I
Really?
could be sitting just like I'm talking to you right now, and then all of a sudden, sweat would start to pour down
Really?
my face. It would soak my shirt and my arms, my legs. It was like every part of my body would start to sweat. And it was a really bizarre and uncomfortable sensation.
Sure. And confusion, or what would happen, like mentally?
That followed.
Did
Yes,
it?
that
Okay.
followed. But when that whole process starts, then the first thing you do is, the heck's going on?
Yeah.
So your confusion kind of does begin at that point.
Yeah.
But I'm not so much in a brain fog as much as I'm confused as to why is this happening to me?
Yeah. Right.
What did I do? What did I eat? Where did I go? Was I around somebody? And you're running all these thoughts through
Yeah.
your head. And it turns out that none of those things were specifically at the issue. The issue was that you have a cellular mutation and that your body does not hold on to potassium at the cellular level like it is supposed to.
Right.
So when it leaks potassium, sodium finds its way into the cell. It becomes way, way, way more technical than I can
Right.
get you into.
Yeah.
But HKPP.org, I believe, can provide some of the more technical answers there.
Yeah.
But in my case, it progressed from having periodic points of having these spasms, and the spasms could be just like vibrations.
Sure. Right.
And they could go from vibrations to full on like body chills where everything's just shaking,
shivering,
and shivering,
right.
and tight, and muscles would pull. Everything would pull together, almost to a fetal position.
Really?
Unless I was being held down. It was super scary.
I remember driving out in the country a few years back in Michigan, and it's very hilly. It was way back in the woods. And I came up over a hill, and I was probably going 55, 60. And at the bottom of the hill, there was a car that was going about 20. And I had to lock up my brakes, and she was going from side to side. And I thought, who's this drunk driver? I was so mad. I pulled her over, like, what are you doing out here drunk driving? And she was just not.
She wasn't there.
No. And the next person came up behind and was like, oh, get her a candy bar. I was like, it never dawned on me that she was having she was going through a sugar
hypoglycemic attack.
Yeah. So, that's what I think of when it's like,
diabetic
did you lose, not consciousness, obviously, but
I never lost
did you get like that?
Consciousness to the level of, waking up someplace else.
I see, right.
But one of the kind of defining attacks that I had to contend with, I was working at a church up in Sacramento, in Fair Oaks, and was working by myself in the gymnasium and was building a audio rack. And I had, on my way to work, gone and grabbed a Starbucks chai cream frappuccino. And I just slammed it.
I got stuff to do.
I don't want to be taking time getting cold.
Right.
Let's just get it done.
Right.
I need that caffeine. Let's go. Caffeine and sugar. And I don't know how long after
Caffeine
I
and
had
sugar?
done that.
What'd you say? Caffeine
I
and
wanted
sugar?
the caffeine because chai has the caffeine.
Yeah.
And the frappuccino it's kind of like a milkshake.
Yeah, pretty much.
So that the combination of the caffeine and the sugar
Oh, I see. Okay,
would
right.
give me that high
Oh, right.
to, just power in.
Yeah.
So I thought. And
So it must have been the creamer or something that just didn't agree with you? Or?
it was the carbs. It was
carbs.
There were 80 carbs in that one drink.
Oh,
80 carbs.
wow.
And like 80 grams of carbs, I should say. There were 80 grams of carbs in that.
Yeah.
And there were 12 grams of protein. So I had massively overdosed my system
Really?
on carbs.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know at that time that carbs and a carb rush into my body would trigger an episode of HKPP.
Right.
So we still hadn't put all this together at
Yeah,
that point.
Right.
So it was after this that we started paying much closer attention to, well, what did you eat? What did you drink?
Right.
Where did we go eat? Did you have French fries?
Oh, that sucks.
If you have French fries, they're going to have salt on them.
You got to break down on how much salt you can consume and everything, huh?
Exactly.
Oh,
And we did. We
had to,
eventually
right.
did.
right.
But at that time, I didn't know.
So you're in the gym, you're putting this thing together. What happened?
And all of a sudden, I started sweating,
Yeah.
profuse sweating, and I started to feel super alone. I felt very isolated.
Really?
I was the only one in the room, so that's fair. But I've been alone in rooms all my life for a different variety of reasons and places.
Just
and
a
things.
fear came over you, huh?
But a fear came over
Really?
me that this is not okay and
Yeah.
you should leave.
And you shouldn't be alone.
And so I remember turning to try and leave, and then I could see in my mind's eye, I could see myself army crawling towards one of the doors and thinking, well, this isn't right.
This can't.
This is not right. I shouldn't be looking at it from here.
Yeah, right.
I'm there.
All those fears go through
And
you. People,
all of that's
I was
going.
looking down on my body when I died, right?
So all of a sudden, in comes one of my coworkers. He came running into the room. Cease came in not long thereafter.
Yeah.
And they called EMS, and EMS came, and it was absolutely terrifying is an understatement. But somewhere between me standing up to leave and being on the floor, I had one of those Nextel phones.
Yeah.
So it had an intercom on it.
Sure.
So I intercommed one of the guys on the the church crew.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I told him. I don't remember now. I'm sure he would remember.
Mayday.
But
Going down.
I need help.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's happening, and I can't see,
Oh, wow.
and I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I also called cease.
Sure.
I don't know
remember
what I
that,
said.
huh?
I don't remember the phone call.
Wow.
So there's some degree of not being conscious, but on the other side of it, I wasn't asleep.
Yeah.
But it was the first time that I had been in a situation where when they got to me, I couldn't really see. It was all gray. And I couldn't really speak very effectively.
Wow.
And my lips were numb, my mouth was numb, my jaw was numb, my neck was numb, my fingers, my hands were numb, my feet were numb, and parts of my legs and calves, thighs were numb.
Really?
Just like something has gone horribly wrong.
Right.
And I don't know why.
Coffee's the only thing I've had, so.
I don't know why.
Right.
So that was one of probably 15 or 16 ER visits that followed, several of those being in an ambulance.
Right. My first thought would be stroke.
Right, which I think was along their lines as well.
Right.
So, but they would do all the tests and everything, and it came back, no, you're good. It's not a stroke.
Right.
Your heart, those
right.
things are all showing like they're supposed to. There's something else that's going on. And when they did the lab stuff, they focused on the glucose levels in particular.
I see.
And so they were noticing, this massive spike in glucose. Then as they did more looking in, they realized, hey, his potassium dropped. So normal range is 3.5 to like 5.3 or 5.2. Mine had dropped down to 1.8.
And diabetes doesn't do that to you.
And diabetes
No,
doesn't.
okay.
At least not with me.
Yeah.
And hypoglycemia didn't do that with me as far as I knew, but they never tested through my youth. They didn't test for potassium. They were testing for glucose because parents said, well, he's hypoglycemic just like his grandfather.
Right. Why would they think anything else?
Right. There was no reason to think anything
Yeah.
else. So, we literally were starting to have to think completely outside the box. What the heck?
Yeah. So whatever they were giving you for diabetes was making the HKPP worse. Sounds like. Or it wasn't helping
with the
it.
diabetes, mine was hypoglycemia more than it was
I don't know the
being
difference.
diabetic.
I just think them as the same. So right.
Well, it deals with an imbalance in the system.
Yeah. Right.
And one of those imbalances, with diabetes, you need insulin.
Okay.
And with
It's more of a glucose thing.
yeah, on the glucose side, you don't need the insulin. You probably have too much insulin going on in your system right now.
I think I've heard you say
and that's
that
where
they
you
were
need the
giving
protein
right
to balance. But you have to have a balance of protein and sugar. You can't just hit it with all protein.
Right.
If you're able to stomach it and get it down, then your body's going to be doing this pendulum thing where it's swinging from one side to the other side, and you're hosed.
Yeah.
There's nothing good that's going to come from that.
Because you're giving it more, and your body's trying to center itself.
And I was there, and
yeah.
we were trying different things.
Right.
Just blindly trying to figure it out. And
So what made him test you for the potassium?
they did a full
Did
blood
they?
panel.
The whole thing, right?
And I'm trying to think if it was an endocrinologist that had focused in on it. There was a neurosurgeon who was looking at what was going on and then looking at the numbers. And he actually contacted us and said, I think you're dealing with an extremely rare disease. And, we're like, tell us
That
more.
would explain it, right?
And he said, well, actually, we're not familiar with this disease. We have some write-ups and stuff from, the mid-60s, late 60s.
Oh, no kidding.
And they tend to be focused more on Asian males. It's like, well, that's not happening here.
Right.
But they said, but it starts in men, it starts in your 40s. I said, well, that did just start up. I was
Did
like
it really?
42.
You were just, oh,
I was
really?
like 42 when this started to just kick my ass.
Yeah.
So he basically said, I'll print it all out for you and you'll have to do your own research because I can't put the time behind it.
Sure.
And it's not something that our hospital specializes in.
Right. It's not something a neurosurgeon could do anyways.
Correct.
You know.
Not a surgeon,
Right.
but a neurologist. Yeah, they could
Is
go
that
in
what-
and start to figure things out.
I see, right.
And that. So he was the one that pointed us in that direction. And so we took off after it and started looking online and digging around and trying to find out as much as we could about it. And the more that we researched and the more we looked, the more we went, holy crap, that's me.
Fits like a shoe. Wow.
That's me. That's what's happening.
That's exactly it, huh?
I didn't know anybody else in the world was dealing
Right.
with what I was dealing with.
Nice to find some information on it, huh?
Right. Because
Right.
I felt very much like an anomaly.
I bet, right?
And, nobody else is familiar with it. And we find also most of the times when I was either picked up by the ambulance or when I would be taken to the hospital by whoever, the first thing that the hospital or the ambulance is going to do is they're going to set up an IV
Saline.
of saline.
Right.
Right.
It's the worst thing you could have.
So I didn't realize, nor did they,
Right.
that that's just, it's pure sodium straight into the system. And it exacerbated every attack I had.
Really?
So my attacks got worse when I went to the hospital before they got better. So we didn't understand that what they were using to try and get me better was making me worse initially.
Yeah.
And then, they would there were times where we had to do IV potassium, and I can sit here and tell you that that's not something you want to have ever done.
Really? For like
Because
burning
it
or
burns.
through your
It's an
veins?
acid. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, you feel it. You feel it burn. I felt it burn
Wow.
up my shoulder. I felt it go into my heart. I felt it burn across my chest.
Scary.
Yeah, and at that time, I'm in attack,
Yeah.
so I can't see, and I can't talk,
Right.
and I can't tell them to stop.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So they're just doing what's protocol. They're doing what they need to do
Yeah.
to bring me back from areas that I didn't want to be.
Yeah. But they didn't know exactly what they were dealing with, so they're
Correct.
so yeah.
So they're operating off their protocols.
Sure.
They're not thinking, oh, it could be this really
Why
bizarre,
would they?
weird,
Right.
strange thing that hardly anybody's ever heard of. And I think at the time, or in that time frame when I was learning about it, I was like only the number 2 or number 3 patient that Kaiser had seen
Wow.
with that actual issue.
Yeah.
So they really, really didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't hold them responsible
Sure,
for not knowing
right.
because they didn't know.
Was there somebody that could diagnose you?
So there was.
There was.
And we learned about, his name was Dr. Lehman Horn. Was a German doctor, and he specialized in periodic paralysis. And so we learned doing our research that there was a group called the Periodic Paralysis Association.
Really?
And we went, okay,
So it's
what's
a real
this
thing.
about?
Yeah.
So it's a real thing.
Right.
And it's an association, so there's other people.
It's not just 3 people, right?
Right. And so I got involved in their message boards. I got involved in their email
All the Asian men that had
communications
it.
and all the, exactly. Going through all of that. And they have a conference every couple of years. So they were going to have a conference in 2009 back in Florida. And Dr. Lehman Horn was going to be taking blood samples from the patients that were going to come. And then he would do diagnostics and gene testing to see if they have what gene mutation, because there are a number of identified gene mutations that are associated with periodic paralysis, with hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, hypokalemic periodic paralysis. I think there's normo.
Yeah.
So he was doing testing. So what he was wanting was for family members of the people that were going to attend the conference to provide a blood sample that they could bring with them. And then they could do a family check. So my parents went with Cece and I and our kids and my electric wheelchair, because that was how I was getting around.
Right.
And we and my aunt, Aunt Judy Clark, went back, and we all gave, did the blood there. I think my sister sent her a sample of hers. I don't remember, but
She should have.
that's what all took place in that time frame. So we went back there, and I was blown away to be in a room of, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 people.
Oh, you actually traveled to Florida.
So we traveled to Florida.
Oh, okay. Right on.
And went to the conference.
Yeah.
And in this conference, one of the main conference rooms was set up with a bunch of round tables, and then, big table up at the front.
Yeah.
And then in the back of the room were like 2 or 3 different sets of paramedics. Okay. And
It's like a football game.
like, what's the, yeah.
Just keep an ambulance over there just in case.
And they said, these folks are trained in HKPP,
Oh, no kidding.
so they'll take care of you.
Nice.
Some of you are going to have attacks while the conference is happening, whether it's because of body temperature change, what you ate, what you drank, the stress levels,
Excitement levels.
excitement
stress.
levels,
Right. Sure.
All these different things are triggers.
Really?
And that's all the stuff that we started really learning about. And I think I actually was the first one to go down on that Saturday morning. And I was eased out of my chair and was carried over to the back of the room. Conference did not stop. Everybody kept going. Nobody focused on me. they took care of getting me set up
That's
and
killer.
getting me brought back around.
Right.
And
You were the first one, so others
others
up going.
went after.
Did they?
Yeah,
Right,
others went
right.
after. And when I was able to see again, then I could tell, okay, I knew I'd been carried somewhere, I didn't know where, but I could still hear everything that was happening.
I see, right.
And then once I was able to start seeing again, then I kind of looked up from where I was lying down on the floor and, oh, there's a person over there. There's another person over there. There's a person over there. Well,
I don't remember them when I went out, but
nobody was lying down when I was sitting at
so
the
they
table.
just pump you full of potassium and bring you
So
back that way?
they put
Sounds like your body
it was
dumps
potassium,
Yeah.
right? So they were putting potassium in. I'm trying to remember how they did it. I think that they did it through what are called FRK tabs. They're essentially Alka-Seltzer.
Okay.
You know, the tab you put in the water and it bubbles up.
Sure.
So they make those with potassium, with 25 MEq of potassium in them. And you put that into a water and you wait until it dissolves. And then once it dissolves, you drink that down. And because of the effervescence in the water, it gets absorbed into the system much faster than if it just sat in your system. So I turned around like substantially fast. I've had attacks where I'd be down for a matter of days.
Really?
And I've had attacks where, you know, I'd come back, the attack would happen in the morning, and then I'd be able to see by afternoon. You know, just any variety therein. It all depends on the level of attack and how much salt I had or how many carbs I had or, you know, I unfortunately learned that when I was in my weakest state, if I was in my chair and I was motoring down an aisle at a grocery store and I go down the freezer aisle, just going down the refrigeration aisle, somebody open a door.
Really?
And that could hit and I could feel everything start to just curl.
Temperature change.
Change. And I'd have to turn that chair around and get back out, get outside if outside was warmer.
Yeah.
And if not, make sure I got Cece's attention or whoever I was with. It's like, we got to go.
There's Wade doing circles in his electric wheelchair again.
What's wrong with him now? Yeah, we had, there were a number of times where we learned the hard way, you know, that most food is prepared with salt.
Yeah.
Just is.
Right.
And all processed food is prepared with salt.
Yeah, and that's a main kicker, huh?
And that's a main kicker.
Right.
So, you know, we would go out to dinner and we would have to tell them no salt
Yeah.
on the fries, no salt on the meat,
Sure.
no seasoning of any kind because some of the mixed seasonings have salt.
Sure.
It's like, can't do it. Can you do garlic salt? No, can't do garlic salt. Can't do it.
Salt.
If it's just garlic, garlic powder,
right.
I'm good. But no, I can't do any of the others. And too many times to remember as a family going into a restaurant, sitting down, you know, each of us kind of looking at each other going, okay, so far we're good. You know, all right. Hopefully we'll be able to get through this and, you know, have a good dinner and order our food. The food would come. I would take a bite. And I'd told them no salt. I would take a bite of the French fry, and I could instantaneously tell it had salt.
Sure.
And in hardly any time after that, muscles would start to twinge and flex. And we'd have maybe 12, 15 seconds to get out of the booth and get back to the car with me under most of my own power.
Yeah.
Probably still being helped by my son
Right. But
and my daughter,
got to get
and
there
definitely
now.
my wife.
We're not gonna.
But exactly. Otherwise, if I go down in the restaurant, they're
Right.
going to call the ambulance.
They're gonna have to.
And what's going to happen? They're going to call the ambulance. Ambulance going to show up, and they're going to start an IV.
Oh, right. Right.
So it's like we know how we can treat it. After 2009, we learned how we could treat it.
Yeah. Right.
And that was with the FRK tabs. But prior to that point, we didn't understand all of that. So there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of leaving restaurants abruptly.
Sure.
And there was a lot of holding some of the restaurants accountable.
Sure. Right. Right.
And saying, if that means you got to clean the grill, you freaking clean the grill.
Right. Right.
And clean off everything that was on there beforehand.
Exactly.
And, that's the only way this can work. Otherwise, we'll find other restaurants to go to. Right. And, by the way, we're going to also notify everybody on our mailing list that your restaurant is not willing to play by these rules. I mean, you'll do it for celiac disease, or you'll do it for, people that can't have wheat or can't have peanuts.
Sure.
Well, this is in the same league as that, because it's your muscles that are getting whacked out.
Yeah.
And your heart's a muscle, and your lungs are muscle, your brain's muscle.
Yeah.
So when these things start going sideways, not only is it like super terrifying to the person experiencing it, but your body's legitimately having a hard time trying to bring itself back to a solid place.
Which is tough, because I think the body's made of 60 to 80% salt water.
Right.
So it's,
which is fine as long as that ratio stays like it is.
Yeah.
So for the hyperkalemic, for the person that has more sodium, more potassium in their system, to the hypokalemic, who has leakage of potassium. Anytime you've got imbalances happening, that sodium's working its way, whether it's too much or too little.
Right.
And it's messing with your muscles.
Sure.
So, there were a couple of rides to the hospital where I started to not be able to breathe. And, I can't speak to my wife.
Right.
But she can hear me starting to choke.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, is this happening?
Right.
It's
but
really,
I can't say it out loud.
I'm gonna die here in a van
again, right?
in a Honda van on my way to a ER. I can't see all that stuff. It's just terrifying.
I bet. Right.
So if there are folks that are dealing with any of those kinds of things, I would greatly encourage you to check out HKPP.org, and I'll look all this up, and then when I post the video, then I'll get all the right links, so you'll have them.
What would be the main things that jumped out at you, like when that neuroscientist went through and gave you that information? What jumps out at you saying, "Oh, that's me. Oh, that's me." So how would somebody know?
The heavy sweats.
The heavy sweats, number one.
The heavy sweats, the spasms, but not just the muscle spasms that happen, like you can see, when your hand shakes, or you can see that the muscles quivering there. You can feel spasms deeper inside. I could feel spasms that were closer to the bone. I could feel spasms that were up inside my stomach, that were underneath my rib cage. I could feel spasms at a completely different level than I knew that I should be able to.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me that was something you could do.
Right.
So, anytime we think of spasms, we think of somebody flopping around on the floor, vibrating and stuff like that. Well, that's all true. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
But it's also happening at a deeper tissue level where those muscles are also struggling.
Right.
So, it can shut your digestion down.
Really?
So, what you may think is just constipation, and this isn't trying to get anybody freaked out over it. It's rare occasions that this would apply, but you can have a paralysis of your intestines. And tell you it's bizarre, and it takes time for those muscles to come back and start working again. But when they stop working, they stop working.
Yeah.
And
when you said in the beginning, this is a neuromuscular disease.
right.
So I think of different things like where the outside of the coating of the nerve is actually being deteriorated. Is it something like that? Is it something that's getting worse over time?
It generally gets worse.
Does the nerves start to deteriorate?
It generally gets worse.
Sounds like a nerve problem more than it does a muscle problem.
But it's more on the it's more on the muscle side.
Is it?
It's more on the muscle side.
That's where you can feel it.
Exactly.
Right. I think when I first met you, you weren't really doing a whole lot. You weren't feeling up to it or anything. And
well, and also when I met you, Cease came with me.
Yeah. Right.
And she came with me as the backup.
Yeah.
So that when you started working on the muscles, that's going to create that imbalance at the muscular level, at the cellular level. You're starting to manipulate things.
Right.
And my system could react
You're
to
thinking,
that.
well, let's see how this goes.
And
right?
so she was there to make sure that if that happened, that you didn't panic.
Yeah.
And that, the two of you'd be able to get me out and put me into the truck.
Yeah.
And she'd drive me back home unless it was bad.
Yeah. Right.
And fortunately, we didn't have that.
Yeah. But you seemed down a little bit when I first met you. And now we're doing this, and you kind of got a purpose. And I've slowly seen you get better. Progress. And I'm sure it's a mental thing,
Part of it is.
Yeah. Lack of purpose. I know you couldn't work.
Correct.
Because if you're afraid, or
so I can't work.
You just can't work, So it's like that's got to be a kick in the stomach. Where's my purpose? So started volunteering to help me out. Don't earn any money, but it's like at least we got something to do, and there's editing to do, and it's like you just seem so more fired up. So maybe that's a key. Yeah.
I think it is. It is finding a purpose.
I'm kind of talking to the other people out there that may have this, that, might be dragged down and, this is my life. Oh, woe is me. But there's still things you can do.
Absolutely.
Whether it's helping old folks or, whatever, helping a knucklehead like me get the electronics worked out or whatever.
Well, one of the first things is to do your research.
Yeah.
And learn about what it is that's going on with you. See as many people as you can to understand it and get a handle on it. And, there will be scary things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
And the reality is, one, they're going to be scary.
Yep.
There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
So they're going to be scary and they're going to happen.
Yep.
And that's how that goes.
Yep. Just be ready.
Just exactly. It's preparation and confidence in your preparation and knowing this is, we'll handle this. We'll get through this. But for those that deal with anything that is like sodium related and such, you're not stuck in a helpless state if you go to the hospital or if you're in an ambulance. You have to tell them that you need sterile water, and they can use lactated ringers. So those two things work in place of saline. And not all ambulances will have that, but most do. But almost all ERs will have sterile water and will have lactated ringers available to them. They may not have them right on site, but they'll have them somewhere else in the hospital that they can get brought over.
But if you're blanked and you can't see and you can't talk, you almost need a medical band.
We did a bracelet for a period of time.
Right.
I did a bracelet for a period of time, and unfortunately, for me, so many times, the bracelet said no saline. It had all the different things.
Sure.
It's like low potassium, no saline,
Right.
Yada yada yada. They would move that out of the way
To
put the IV in, and I was notoriously a hard stick, so they would either go into the back of the hand or they'd go into the wrist.
Sure.
Very seldom were they successful going into the arm. So we thought, okay, cool. We have the bracelet around the wrist. That should handle it.
Right.
No.
Better get it tattooed.
So my wife began the process early on of taking a Sharpie and writing on me.
Really?
No saline
Yeah.
on my arms, on the back of my hand.
Just in case she's
she
not
wrote it
there.
on my forehead. It was on my chest, I think, at one point. And it was on my arms.
Right.
And
I don't mean to laugh, but I know you've been through
that was it.
the ringer.
I could wake up the next day at home with, kind of a series of foggy thoughts and stuff, and then look and go, oh, right. Right. Now it's coming back to me more. Right. I know what happened.
Back in college, I used to say I'm an idiot when I woke up. Right? Different college than I went to, maybe. Well, I wanted to have you on today to talk about this because I know there's a lot of people out there hurting. I don't want to overcomplicate this particular podcast because I want it just to be mostly about what you're going through on this.
Cool.
I don't want to cloud it up too much, and we'll talk more on different things. But this is the main thing I want because there may be some people, and you said that don't understand this. And
absolutely.
And you do all the editing, so I know you're going to put in all of the extra stuff that they can link down below and get to any information that they need or any of that kind of stuff.
Periodic paralysis is one of the most misdiagnosed issues. Really? I believe.
Yeah.
So I think that there are way more people that actually do deal with it than the records are going to show.
Right.
Because it really takes some significant research to go in and tie all these pieces together and say, so you had spasms, but you also had paralysis, which are kind of opposite things.
Right.
And numbness and sweating, and you couldn't talk, and then you couldn't see, and there's a variety of things that once all those things are brought into the equation and you're able to look at labs, and you can start looking at values and say, oh, look at that.
Right.
There was a direct shift.
Right. My
potassium dropped, my sodium increased. Magnesium plays a part in all of that as well.
Does it really?
So magnesium and potassium, they're powerful together, but in balance.
Right.
But it was not unusual if you were having low potassium to have low magnesium. And if you were able to increase the magnesium at the same time as you're increasing your potassium, you might find that you recover faster. So
this took a lot of research to find those things.
Oh my gosh. Oh, one of the things that, and more or less close with this, I guess, was that when we started doing the liquid potassium, and that was in the 2005, 2006, 2007, 8, even into 2009, we were still doing liquid potassium, which tastes horrible.
Oh, okay. It's not something you were shooting in your veins. It was something that was...
No, it's something you had to swallow.
Oof.
So we had hospitals say, mix it with apple juice. And it doesn't make it taste better, but it makes it more palatable to be able to get it down.
Right.
Which is true. It did.
Did it? Yeah.
When we went to the 2009 conference, what we found out from the people at the conference and the EMTs was that the sugar in the apple juice would bind with the potassium and would be flushed through the system. So you're only getting a minuscule amount of the potassium that you are forcing yourself to drink.
Right.
So you're having to drink more and more to be able to get yourself to come back out of this fog. Brain fog was another symptom.
Sure.
So, and that's a term that's used more now.
Right.
But yeah, you get to a point where you're just confused. You don't know what you were talking about. You don't know where you were going. Everything stops.
Right.
And
that's frustrating.
It's extremely frustrating, but for a person who's got the disease, when that happens, that's normally an indication that you've got few minutes, if not just seconds,
really,
before your body's going to lock up or go limp. And if you're standing, sucks to be you.
Better sit down, right?
Right. Or get against a wall.
Yeah.
I did that numerous times. Just get my back up against the wall and then end up sliding down.
Yeah, right.
As opposed to just falling forward or falling to the side or back or whatever.
Bang your head on something.
Yeah. So, but we learned with the potassium that the FRK, the effervescent potassium, was the way to go to treat these attacks quickly and suffer less muscle damage.
I see. Right.
Because of it.
So as soon as you feel yourself starting to sweat out, and it's like, whoop, plop,
go
plop,
grab
fizz, buddy.
Exactly.
Right on.
Exactly. 8 ounces of water, a couple of tabs, put in, let it fizz its way, drink it down with a straw, whatever you need to do to be able to get it, because sometimes paralysis will start.
Yeah.
And if they can get a straw inside, if you still have control of your tongue
swallowing
and your
everything
throat,
else,
you can swallow.
Sure.
And get that into your system, because if it doesn't go in that way, right, it's going to have to go in that way.
Right. And then you can slowly feel yourself coming back out of it with that?
Yep.
No kidding.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And just lots of lessons learned.
Yeah, buddy. Well, this has been so informative. Sure appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely, dude.
All right. Good to see you, man. All right. Thanks for coming in and giving us all this information.